Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And I'm Patrick Guerra.
And Patrick, this week we kick off what is going to end up being an insane month of September. You'd think it would be October because that's Halloween month, but no. September has a new horror film release and sometimes multiple horror film releases every single week this month. So we will be doing a lot of new horror film reviews this month and, of course, going into October, into Halloween month. And today we kick off with one of the buzziest horror films of the entire year, Barbarian, opened in theaters on Friday, and this is one of the most talked about horror films of the year, with a lot of people saying the less you know, the better.
I would agree with that statement. I knew so little going into this. I hadn't even seen a trailer, which you know me, Damon. That's like the perfect scenario for me where I know almost nothing about a movie, and I knew nothing about Barbarian except for the fact that Justin Long actually came into our studio at Comic-Con because I was working with MTV this year to talk about Barbarian, but they kept it so vague. I never really understood what any of the movie was about. He's basically just talking about working in horror and having fun doing that because he has a history working in horror with Kevin Smith's Tusk and all that. So I knew nothing going in. I knew zero. I didn't even know who was in the movie. I had forgotten about the Justin Long interview. And then, I watched it, and I'm glad I knew nothing going in because I watched the trailer right before we started the show today, and it would have given away way too much, in my opinion.
I saw the trailer only because it played before another movie I saw. I want to say maybe it was Men. When I saw Men, maybe they played that trailer, or maybe it was there was some film I saw fairly recently where they played the Barbarian trailer. Now, to its credit, while it does give away a little bit, it doesn't give away a lot. Like, it doesn't really tell you what you're necessary. Now, I believe there's two trailers because there's one trailer, and I only saw the first one, where it really didn't give away a lot. The only thing it told you was the very bare bones essential premise, which is a woman shows up to an Airbnb that she has rented, and she knocks on the door, and there's already somebody staying there. And it turns out they've double booked this Airbnb, which already sounds kind of bizarre. And immediately your red flags go up when you start thinking about, okay, this is weird. It's a strange guy staying in the house, and it's a woman by herself. That immediately already sounds like a really creepy premise based on 2022. But the reality is, while that is the very bare bones of a premise. Okay, let's just be clear. Now, we're not going to get into full spoiler territory until later, and to be clear, we will warn you way ahead of time before we get into full on spoilers, because this is a film that I agree with what everyone said, and I'm going to say it to you right now. The less you know, the better. Now, you're probably thinking, well, people are just going to turn off the podcast because we're telling you the less you know. We're not going to spoil anything about the actual movie itself right now. We will get into that a little later. We talk about categories and we get into our spoiler section. But right now, we are in spoiler-free territory. And I will say I recommend going in knowing less because all I knew was the premise. I saw the trailer, but it was a while ago, and then I specifically avoided any other trailers, interviews, reviews because I had heard that right away. Do not know much about this movie going into it. So I avoided all that. Now I know you do it consciously. I don't mind a trailer. Little things don't bother me. But I wanted to not know anything. And whether you love this movie or you end up hating this movie, I will say 100% with certainty, do not know more than what you see in the trailer. And even the trailer, if you could avoid the trailer, I wouldn't even say, I would say do it. Like, again, the basic premise is fine because that doesn't ruin anything. That's just a very basic, plot. Otherwise, go in with as little knowledge as possible because the twists and turns that happen in this movie can easily be ruined, and they will be ruined. I mean, let's be honest. Someone's going to be an idiot on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, and they're going to try to ruin this movie for other people, which is unfortunate. Yeah. But my advice, and I'm sure you'll have the same advice, go in knowing as little as possible.
Well, you notice me having a bit of a grin here, Damon. You're starting to turn into me, aren't you?
I am.
With that long diatribe about do not know too much before going into this movie. That's the way I live. That's the way now, admittedly, trailers do attract me to movies almost always. With horror, it's going to be a way easier. It's like, oh, that was buzzy. That's all I need to know. Like, people want to see it. People are talking about it at horror festivals. Cool. I'll watch it because of that. I don't need a trailer to to get engaged into a movie at all. The trailer I saw did set up that there was something under the house, which I'm not going to go into any deeper than that if I need to right now, but at least that trailer's out there in the world. And I was like, okay, well, there's that too, but how is it connected? Who's it connected to, et cetera, et cetera. That is the mystery that will unfold right throughout the movie. I will say strengths right off the top, cinematically very dynamic as a movie. Cregger really, there's a lot of cinematic language that's very specific for the characters, and the character that's most prominently featured in the trailer is played by Georgina Campbell. The character goes by the name of Tess. I was really kind of impressed with that first 30 minutes of the movie that really focus on her. It's really, really well made. It's a well-made movie, and I like movies that I would even argue that Cregger's kind of taking a big swing with how dynamic the camera's moving, how subjective the camera is. It's very clearly like trying to put you in certain moods and places. What about you, Damon? What about the kind of initial kind of setup? Because I do think the first 30 minutes of the movie are very much like a setup for what's going to be happening throughout the movie. Going in as cold as you don't normally do, what were your takeaways from it?
Atmospherically, it was really, really well done. They set the stage right away. You're driving up into this, you're driving up to this very quaint looking house in the middle of a really bad neighborhood in Detroit. Now, if you've ever been to Detroit, I've been to Detroit many times. Sadly, that is a city in America that has really fallen on harder times, especially during when we were in the early 2000s. They had a lot of jobs going away in the city. Like I was up there 2003, 2006, maybe 2005, somewhere around that time. And it was kind of depressing. Like it was just like you go to like these areas and it was just like a couple of nice houses and then just like dilapidated places. So when you see this film, that's kind of what you're stepping into, a really nice, quaint little house in a really bad neighborhood. And that's 100% accurate for where Detroit, and I'm sure a lot of people, are, at in terms of, cities in America having fallen on harder times. So I don't think that's unique to Detroit by any stretch of the imagination. But atmospherically, he sets the stage really well because you show up at this Airbnb, it's pouring down rain, you're with this woman, you don't know anything about her, but you know she's alone. And once again, in 2022, it's sad that that's a terrifying situation to be in, but it's a terrifying situation to be in.
It was a sad situation to be in like 500 BCE.
Yeah.
It's just like, and I will, like, I kind of want to like piggyback off that. The movie really sets up the initial dread of just being a woman alone.
Yeah.
And then being a woman alone with another man she has no idea who he is. Like that initial setup, and that's in the trailer, no spoilers there. Man, it's just, that part of the movie is incredibly well done because you're just like, I don't know why on earth I should trust this guy. There's no actually good reason. He's being nice, he's not being aggressive or strange or anything like that. But there's no good reason for me to be safe in this house with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, and I know I say this all the time, Zack Cregger, the director, after the fact, I did read some interviews with him, and he had said that Jordan Peele actually gave him advice as he was directing his first full-length film like this, and then again making that transition from comedy into horror, as I mentioned at the top. And Jordan Peele also mentioned to him, he said, at the end of the day, one thing you always want to focus on is acting. You get great acting, it ups the ante for everything in the film. Yeah. And that was a big deal. I always say this about horror. I am still a massive fan of low budget horror with actors and actors you've never heard of before. And you can see incredible performances built from that. I always bring up Blair Witch Project is a great example of that, where, again, they were selling it as like this could be real life, but, you had no idea who these people were. They were not named actors. They were just unknown people, and they pulled off a hell of a performance. And it's happened, many, many times. But when you can start your cast with Georgina Campbell, who I knew from Black Mirror. Her Black Mirror episode was tremendous. And she was also in a recent show for Apple TV that I watched. I believe it was called Suspicion, or what was it called? I can't remember what it was called. She was in a new Apple TV show that was like a 1-season, like limited series. And she was in there with Uma Thurman and some other people. It was a really, really solid show, and she was really good in it. I like her a lot. And then Bill Skarsgård, who a lot of people, of course, know as Pennywise from the It films. He's been in other things. He's going to be in the new Crow movie. And then Justin Long, who you mentioned. I love Justin Long. I think Justin Long is an incredibly underrated actor. He's fantastic in a lot of things he's done. I loved him in Zack and Miri Make a Porno, which is a Kevin Smith movie. He has a brief appearance in that. He's hilarious. He's a really good comedic actor, and I've heard a lot of people talk about why comedy and horror blend so well together is because in comedy, much like horror, it's all about timing. Mm-hmm. It's all about timing of when you can laugh and all about timing when you can be scared. And that's why a lot of people believe horror and comedy have blended together so well lately. Not necessarily horror comedies, but like comedians coming into horror. Like I mentioned, Danny McBride and now Zack Cregger and, of course, Jordan Peele. Like comedic timing and horror timing are two very important things. When you can start your cast with those three people without even going any deeper, and this is a very small cast, let's be clear about it. We're not talking about a massive cast. Georgina Campbell, who is really good. Bill Skarsgård, who is really good, and Justin Long, who is really good. You're already a foot up on the competition because now you've got an intriguing premise, that mysterious premise. You've got a strong base cast, and you've got a situation that, without even exploring it any further, without even digging into what actually makes this film so weird and strange and all the things that happen later that we're not going to talk about till we get to spoilers. Take all that away. The premise itself of a single woman alone traveling to a strange city in Detroit, arriving at an Airbnb, and then somebody's already inside staying there. And it's a strange man by himself. Mm-hmm. That in and of itself, without even going a step further, is already kind of scary, right? Like, you don't have to go any further than that. Yeah. It's already kind of scary. So without getting too deep in the film, you're already working. You're already ahead of the jump, I guess is what I'm getting at. You're already a leg up on your competition.
I would almost argue that premise is actually the scariest aspect of the movie. Now, obviously, when we get into spoilers, we'll get into what makes this movie actually like a horror movie, because it descends into a horror film for sure. But we don't want to talk about that stuff just yet. But that alone, to me, I was like, oh, there's a lot of dread in this buildup. There's a lot of dread. And when that first act closes, it closes with a huge bang, right? It closes in a really, really big way. But that buildup alone is so tense because you don't ever feel safe. So that's a great way to establish dread. It's just put us in Tess's shoes and being in a situation where you're just like, I don't know if I'm okay. And every little step of the way we inch closer to being more comfortable, there's another reason to still stay on edge, which what really fucking sucks about that is that I think that's how women exist in the world. You know what I mean? Where they're just like, I've gotten comfortable now with this stage of the situation. Can we stay comfortable, or is it, or are things going to turn sour really quickly? I thought that part of the movie was brilliantly done.
Well, so this is not a spoiler. This is just so the inspiration for the film that started, as I mentioned in the intro, was Zach reading a book called The Gift of Fear. And the book is about one part of the book. It's not the entire book. One part of the book is about what, basically microaggressions, red flags that women need to be aware of, like little things. And he mentioned, men complimenting women in a kind of a strange way, or men doing something for a woman unprompted. In this case, again, this is not ruining the movie, okay? I want to be clear, but this has absolutely nothing to do with any of the stuff later in the movie. There's a moment in the opening part of the movie after we meet Tess and Keith, who is Bill Skarsgård's character, and they're trying to figure out this whole Airbnb situation, right? Again, you know the premise. There's a moment where he's just like, they're just trying to figure this out, and he's like, let me make you a cup of tea while we figure this out. Oh, I'm good. I don't want tea. And he's like, well, I made you a cup of tea anyways.
Yeah.
And he was talking about in that book, little things like that are sort of like a man, kind of like exerting his dominance over a woman.
He's insisting. Yeah.
Like, no, I'll do it. No. Oh, yeah. No, I'll take care of that. No, I'll make you this cup of tea. Now, again, that ruins nothing. And I promise you that ruins
has nothing
nothing.
to do with the movie.
Yeah. That is the kind of stuff that Zach was talking about that he found so bizarre because, and you and I are examples, is we're men. We don't think about that. So we don't have to think about that. That's something we never deal with.
Yeah, I'm never worried about somebody poisoning my drink.
Well, not even the point, not even getting to like the sinister nature of it. Just the microaggression of somebody saying like, "Would you like a drink?" And I said, "No, I'm good." And they just make it for you anyway. They disregarded your wishes. It sounds so minor and it sounds so innocuous. But that's kind of what this guy was talking about in this book, is like picking up these little trigger warnings of what could
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I'm thinking about all the Mexican and Jewish mothers I grew up with who absolutely asserted their dominance over me by insisting I eat food and like force feeding me. So,
yeah, but like that's what he's just talking about the little things you don't notice. You know what I mean? Those little, because they can escalate. That's all it is. Just these little trigger warnings, these little red flags. You and I, as men, we don't see that on that level, on that microscopic level. We don't see that, right? Like we don't deal with that. And that's, again, I get it. Like when I read that, it kind of clicked in my head and I was like, oh yeah, like I wouldn't think of that. Like I would not think of someone saying, hey, can I fix you a drink? And me saying, no, I'm good. And then they just show up with a drink anyways and say, no, here's your drink. I'm like, I didn't want a drink. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of like, again, exerting that little bit of dominance. So that's the very simple premise of it. And that would literally, he said, the director said that was just a scene he wanted to explore. Mm-hmm. And everything else in the film spiraled out from there.
I almost want to say that that's where my biggest grievance with this movie comes from, because it does feel like a scene removed from the larger movie. And we'll get into why I feel that way in the spoilers, but it's about 30 minutes. I mean, I'm guessing, I didn't time it, but it's that portion of the movie is about the first half hour of the movie. It's done well. And I was like, no, this is good. Like I don't actually have complaints with it. But it did raise a pretty huge question for how the rest of the movie unfolds for me. Yeah, I mean, we're sort of muzzled a little bit, Damon. I don't know when you want to start to break into the spoiler territory, but it's going to be tough to kind of get past this opening scene, which is pretty easy to kind of understand from the trailer what's going on there. One little thing I'll mention is, how about just the hell of Airbnbs? like when you start out with Tess and it's raining and she's trying to get into this place and the key's not there. And then she calls and it's a property management service, which is the worst thing. You want to talk to a human being when you're renting an Airbnb. And if you hear a property manager service, good luck getting anything done. I was just in like Washington State and I came into the house and I tried to turn on the AC and it wouldn't work. I called the number. Sure enough, property manager. Sure enough, no one ever got back to me. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This works out great. And the property manager problem becomes a problem later in the movie as well. But I was just like, yeah, you know what? I might go for a Motel 6 over Airbnb at this point.
So I don't want to get sued by Airbnb by disparaging them, and I'm also using Airbnb.
They don't own a house.
I'm also using Airbnb as an example. There are other not ride share but home sharing services.
Right.
So let's just say home sharing. However you want to say
home sharing, sure.
I did a quote unquote home share through Airbnb a couple of years ago. I went to Chicago for a work trip. And I stayed in a nice neighborhood, really nice neighborhood, nice house. But just stepping into somebody else's house, and I was staying like they had like an upstairs where it was kind of like cordoned off for me. And then they had their own upstairs that was like cordoned off for them. And then they had like their living room and their kitchen. And it was just, I don't know. It was like, I was so unbelievably uncomfortable the entire time I was there. Like I was sitting on one ass cheek the entire weekend. Like I just could never get comfortable because it was so weird being in somebody else's house and they're like downstairs. I can hear them talking and watching TV and like it was just so weird and bizarre. So that, and like, I get it. Like that experience was one of the only, I've only used an Airbnb, a home share twice. And that was one of them. And that second one was like, yeah, I think I'm going to continue to pay for hotels because this was just a really weird experience. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm saying it was weird for me. But this situation that they put you in the movie is even weirder because imagine showing up and you knock on the door and somebody's already there and they booked the same house. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's a weird, before we get to total spoilers, okay, because we got to get to that soon. Without getting into the, how do you feel about the rest of the film without getting a spoiler? Like in terms of like, did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? Just so we can give the audience something to know, like going into the film. Like again, my advice here, I'll give you my advice first. I'll say first and foremost, the less you know, the better. As I said earlier, don't know if you know it. All you need to know what we talked about so far is all you need to know. Okay, you don't need to know anything else going in. Personally, everything else that unfolds, and again, I'm not going to sit here and try to tease it. Everything else that unfolds for the remainder of the movie, there are some solid surprises. There are some solid performances. There's some really creepy, tension-filled moments, some really like off-putting, tension-filled moments. And overall, personally, I really enjoyed this film. And I know somebody told me going in, the one thing I heard was this film is going to be 2022's Malignant. And what they meant by that is Malignant ended up being the James Wan film that we talked about last year. Malignant ended up being one of those horror films that was incredibly polarizing. One half of people you talked to thought it was brilliant, it was amazing, and a real great change of pace for a well-known horror director like James Wan, who's well-known for doing Conjuring and haunted house kind of films, than to go into Malignant, which is something totally different. There are other people who said, oh my, it was so stupid, I didn't get it, like I didn't understand, the whole thing just was off-putting, I didn't like it. I don't think that's an unfair comparison for Barbarian, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to walk out of the theater saying, wow, did not see that coming, crazy movie, really enjoyed it. And I feel like there's going to be maybe to a lesser extent people who come out saying that was really stupid. I didn't understand why they did the choices they made. Now you can say that's so so innocuous. There's no way you could get a spoiler from what I'm telling you there. Right. And that could be every movie. I get it. Like every
that's every Marvel movie.
That's every Marvel. Yeah, totally. But I personally walked out of this film saying I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the premise. I really enjoyed the performances. I enjoyed the little, twists and turns you hear, they're here and there. And more than anything, I'm impressed that a first-time filmmaker like Zack Cregger really pulled something off interesting and different.
I will say that I was very impressed with the quality of the craftsmanship of the filmmaking. I thought was really good. But ultimately, I left feeling a little bit hollow because to me, it was a movie that was almost more focused on its filmmaking techniques than it was on its story choices. It makes its story choices clear, but to me, they don't pay off, I think, the way they intended. That's my opinion. So I left feeling like, okay. Like, I didn't think it was bad. Like, I think I can understand why somebody would come out of Malignant and go, that was fucking horrible. Not because I didn't think it was horrible, but if you're not ready for something that is so blatantly like 90s, which is what Malignant was, it was like almost like a 90s made for TV movie, and it was intended to be that. You probably came out of it completely like baffled, and you're like, what the fuck did I just watch? But I came out of Malignant being able to appreciate like a lot of strong aspects of the movie, and I feel the same way. I feel very much the same way about this movie that I did about Malignant, which is it's incredibly well done filmmaking, and it's probably just not for me because but I do take umbrage with the story, and we'll get into that in spoilers.
All right. So with that being said, we are now going to get into spoiler territory. So if you have not seen Barbarian, Rarely do I say this, and rarely should I say this as a podcast host who wants people to subscribe and enjoy our show. Stop listening, because you do not want to know what we're about to tell you. I promise you do not want to know what we're about to tell you and get into spoilers. If you have not seen Barbarian, go check it out, and then please, please, please come back and listen to the rest of the show, because what we have to get into for spoiler territory will ruin everything else about the movie. So, you've been forewarned. We are now getting into spoiler territory as we get into that, and also our categories coming up in just a few moments. So, the twists and turns in Barbarian, the change of story, the change of scenery, all the different things we get into after the initial premise. That's where you really started to bump heads with this movie.
Oh yeah, definitely. So we talked at length just now about this buildup between Tess and this guy Keith, and they're in this house together. Their night turns out to be just fine. Nothing crazy or overt or anything. They just kind of share some stories, and they seem to be nice people, and that's kind of where that ends. She goes to sleep. Something's in the house, and I was like, here we go. I'm wringing my hands. My freaky little horror brain is ready for whatever's coming. And there's clearly something in the house. She gets up. It's not him. We thought it was him, but he's fast asleep. Something is in this house. And Damon, it all starts kind of going to shit, doesn't it? I mean, I mean that for the characters. Like, I don't think the movie goes to shit, but for the characters, things go to shit because Tess finds out, and you see this in the trailer, that there's a basement's basement in this house. And that's where I started to fucking have problems with this movie, because we set up that Tess is very on guard. Tess is very like, who are you? What are you? She takes a picture of his ID without telling him, to make sure she has record of him, to make sure he is who he is. She's very suspicious of everything. Now, obviously, you don't have a horror film unless your characters make some monumentally bad choices. Tess might take the cake for bad choices of all time in characters, because for a woman that is clearly that suspicious of what's going on, she descends into the basement alone, and she goes further and further and further. And that I could not get over the fact that she would make choices that were that bad in this movie. Part of it is because Keith goes down there to kind of see what's going on, and then he gets trapped. Once what happens, Damon, I don't know. What do you think? Tell me why this movie worked a lot for you, because I know you liked it.
So part of it, okay, so I'm not going to disagree with the whole making bad decisions. One, I will say that's just the staple of horror. I mean, you can't.
Right. But for the setup, my point is for her setup, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, here's why I would disagree a little bit. Now, again, even in the movie, I was kind of scratching my head, like, why are you going down into this creepy ass basement? But again, I'm in the horror movie mode. I am, I'm the guy who does, like, I'm the one who, as a horror movie fanatic, will never go into a creepy basement. I just know better. I've seen too many movies in like this one to go into a creepy basement. My only defense, and again, this is just a minor thing, even I was like, what are you doing?
Right. Yeah. I think the whole audience that I was there with was like, what the fuck? Like, no one could understand, even though they were in a horror movie.
My only defense would be that at that moment, after she had gotten comfortable with Keith and realized that he's not some creepy, weird, bad dude, she let her guard down a little bit. And in that moment, curiosity got the better of her sensibility. Would be my defense. I'm not saying it's good, and I'm not saying it's right, because again, I was like, "What are you doing?" But in that moment, when you let your guard down just a little bit, you know what I mean? Like, because she already. Here's why I say it didn't. I didn't question it as much. Here's why. Earlier in the movie, after the whole tea incident, where he's like, I'll make you a cup of tea, and she's like, no, thank you, and he makes it anyways, and that's that microaggression we talked about earlier. Later, there's a bottle of wine sitting there with like a bow on it as like a welcome gift or something to like the Airbnb stayers or whatever. And early in the film, he's like, do you want some wine? And she's like, no, like. And he's like, and he actually says, I'll open it in front of you so you don't, he's like, I realize like making you a cup of tea sounds creepy. I get it now. Like, I get why you didn't want the tea, but here's a bottle of wine. I wanted to open it in front of you so you could see I'm not doing anything. Like, I get it. Let's have a glass of wine. And she's like, no, I'm good. I'm not going to have any wine. He's like, okay. He opens the wine, pours himself a glass and he's drinking it. When we skip ahead that night, she's drinking wine with him. They're chatting. They're flirting. It's getting, some things are going on here. You know what I mean? They're getting, so I assume in that moment, like, she felt comfortable with him and she let her guard down. Again, doesn't totally excuse the choice of going down into a creepy ass basement. To her credit, I will say, she does go down into the creepy ass basement and finds this weird room with like a nasty, dirty cot, what looks like blood all over it, blood on the wall, and a video camera, which immediately red flags just all over. And she does get the hell out of there. She runs out and is like, I'm getting the F out of here. I'm getting the fuck out of here. I'm getting out of here right now. And then she runs into Keith and she's like, we got to go. We're going. We're like, she makes the right choice in that moment. She's like, we're getting the fuck out of here. I'm not. And all he says is, this goes back to the whole microaggression, guys being guys. He doesn't quite believe her. And he's like, let me check it out. Let me be the man. And let me go down and check out this creepy ass basement just to see what you're seeing. And then all hell breaks loose. So my defense of her is that she let her guard down a little bit. She came to kind of trust this guy a little bit. But to her credit, when she did get to the creepy basement, she got out. It was him. It was Zach who went back down there, Keith who went back down there. Yeah. He's the one who fucked it all up. So he did. His choices are far worse, in my opinion.
His choices were idiotic, definitely. And he goes even further down. He goes down into like this dungeon or whatever and gets stuck down there. But like, she could have been like, okay, you go check it out. I don't need to. I'm leaving. Like, she had plenty of agency, like, as a person. Like, she was established. I think that's the problem, is like, if Cregger had established her a little bit more as easily led, I'll put it that way, like, as just in a simple way. Like, she's headstrong. She's headstrong all throughout the initial run up to the movie. So for her, it seemed so strange for her to keep doing that. Now, I was still in, by the way, because again, we're in a horror movie. So I'm like, well, of course she has to make the choice. It doesn't line up with how we've established her. So let's descend deeper. She descends deeper, Damon. We get an awesome first end of the first act. I'm saying it. It was great. They're in this dungeony tunnel deep down there, and she descends deeper because he goes missing, which, by the way, she should have ran the fuck out of the house. But hey, we're in a horror movie. It's fine. But he's screaming for help. So she goes down there because she's a good person. I get that. She goes down into that tunnel. He's still screaming for help. She's in a pitch black tunnel. And she finds him and he's like, something bit me. And I was like, run, bitch. Get the fuck out of there. And Bill Skarsgård comes out of the fucking shadows and he's being attacked by something. I mean, we don't get a great look at it until it kills him violently in front of her and end Act 1. Right. And then we're basically into a whole new story right after that, which is the Justin Long story. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Justin Long. So yeah, after the violent murder of Bill Skarsgård's Keith, it just ends. Ooh. Done. Fade to black, and then you're popping up with Justin Long riding in a convertible, driving around California, and like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah, just completely different world.
And Justin Long is playing kind of a douchey actor named AJ who is working on a pilot, and he gets a call from his agents and, we assume manager, basically saying there's been an allegation made against you by a female co-star, and it's alleging that you assaulted her. And as a result, you're going to get pulled from this project. There's going to be a story come out about it, and there's a chance you might get charged with a crime. And he's like, I didn't do anything. I'm innocent. I didn't do anything. And then he comes to find out that his finances are not in great shape and nobody wants to associate with him all of a sudden because he's all of a sudden very, very toxic in this business. And, we've seen that happen in Hollywood a lot. Unfortunately, it took the Me Too movement to actually get there, but it happened. No shit. And suddenly he becomes kind of like, public enemy number one. No one wants to be associated with him. So he's trying to gather cash because he has to work on a defense strategy and a counter defamation lawsuit, but he needs money. He doesn't have that much money. So he starts exploring his portfolio. Like, how can I get money for my legal defense? And he remembers he has rental properties he owns in Michigan, which is his hometown, is Detroit, Michigan It's his hometown. He's like, well, maybe I can dump these off for some money that will help pay for my legal defense. And we go back and we find out that AJ, being Justin Long's character, actually owns the house that serves as the Airbnb. Now, he's an absentee landlord because he's doing it as an investment property. He's not doing it because he wants to be a landlord or because he wants to be an Airbnb owner. He's doing it because it's an investment. So like you said, a property manager runs it. He just owns it. And so he goes back there trying to get all his ducks in a row to sell the place so he can hopefully make enough money for his legal defense. And then he gets drawn into the chaos. And probably I have to admit, like the way they lured him in and the way he got down into that creepy ass basement was truly hilarious. And so we talk about out of character for the woman. You talk about like her being, even though I defend it, him being completely oblivious to what's around him
is a little weird.
No, it's 100% on brand for an idiot like that.
Oh no, it's on brand for him.
Yeah. Like for him to just be concerned about sizing up the house that he can sell and how much money he can make, and not even like paying attention to all the warning signs we talked about earlier. Again, going back to the director's idea for this film. Things that women see and get creeped out by, men don't necessarily think of. Now, I disagree a little bit because if I'm in that situation, even in the most unguarded situation I am, if I go down in a basement and there is a room with a creepy ass nasty cot, looks like blood all over the place, and a video camera, I do not care. I am getting the fuck out. Okay.
Don't you think, Damon, that that's actually the biggest problem with the movie is that room?
Probably, yeah, because it's such a
that
warning
room
sign.
it's not just a red flag. It's a red blimp.
Yeah.
Like it's like something's very wrong here, and everyone reacts to it differently. But it should push everyone out of the house. I think it's almost too far. Not to
do a rewrite of Living Dead. Let me give you an idea and just see if this would be better, because it would be creepy, but it would be like, why was, instead of the creepy ass room with the bed, the nasty cot, and the video camera, what if it was like a child's room, like totally nice, like totally done up, like looks like a child lives there in the middle of this creepy ass weird basement. It's just a child's room. And then out of the corner, you see there's like a security camera pointed down or something. That would be like red flag. Red flag, but not like total. Like you'd be like, what, huh? Like, why is there a child's room down here?
100%, something like that, or even the same exact room, but instead of having a very obvious tripod and camera pointed at the bed, which is like, okay, that nothing about that is right. If it was a CCTV security camera up in the corner, that maybe people didn't initially see, because you walk in there and go, oh, this is fucked. This is like a creepy little room. This is fucked. But like I've seen that in like house renovation shit where it's just a creepy room. There's nothing in it that is an actual red flag. There's a bloody handprint on the wall.
Yeah.
And a camera on a tripod. Sorry, that's just too big. It's almost like that choice for Cregger as a director was one step too far. Because you can suspend my disbelief. I watch horror films for fun all the time. And I could have even accepted, as far-fetched as it was for Tess to keep descending down this basement, I could have accepted all the choices that she made because we're in a horror movie. But once you see that room, it's like the room was a bridge too far. But then it goes even farther. And I think this is around the time AJ's character gets caught, when he's measuring for square footage in this tunnel. And he sees the bloody cages.
Yeah. So as weird. So like I said, like I agree that probably is a bridge too far. But in AJ's case, because he's a total douche. He's a complete and utter douche, and like a really problematic dude who's like, he's the victim. He's always the victim. I didn't do anything wrong. They're doing wrong to me. Yeah. He's that guy.
They actually drew his character really smartly, because in that first initial conversation where his managers are telling him like, you're being accused of sexual assault, they very wisely have this little piece of dialogue in there where he goes, "That's not how it happened."
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay. So it's not like he's not saying we never slept together. He's saying, the way she's describing it is not how it happened.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay. So he sees the situation differently. And then it actually escalates further and further from there.
Yeah. And so for him, for Justin Long's character to be kind of oblivious to this and kind of get into like the, the financial windfall of having a house with all this square footage. It's hilarious. I mean, it's an absolute, like, because he finds the room and he's like, what the hell? And instead of like running out or calling the cops or like whatever, he grabs his tape measure and he starts like measuring square footage. And he's like, maybe I can make more money. Now, again, red flags everywhere. But I question Tess's decision far more than I question his, because he's that much of an idiot. He's that much of a douche who's not considering. And I understand, like I talked about earlier with like the whole microaggression, the little red flags that, he talked about women should see and men don't necessarily see. I understand this is an exaggerated version of that.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
It's exactly that. She saw it, was like, I'm getting the fuck out of here. And if it wasn't for Keith, the guy she runs into, she would have gone.
Yeah.
Justin Long's character is like, I own this house and boy, I could sell it for a lot because boy, there's a lot of basement space in this place. Mm-hmm. And that's where, again, it's an exaggerated example and I get where you're coming from. But again, that's where I'm kind of like, okay, he's proving the point of how little awareness sometimes we have as men in an equally scary situation. And I understand it's exaggerated and it doesn't make sense to you and I, but I 100% could see a douchey guy like Justin Long's character doing exactly what he did.
Oh, I 100% understood it. Like, I think that was my issue, is I was like, oh, it makes sense why he does everything. It doesn't make as much sense why she does everything.
And that's fine. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. And that was more my issue, was like, well, AJ's drawn better. That's no fault to Georgina Campbell. Like, her acting's fine, like totally fine. And Justin Long, obviously veteran. So it's not on the acting side of things at all. It's not, it's the believability of their specific premises to me was a little too far, especially when Tess sees that room. Like, she'd be like, go look if you want. I'm getting the fuck out of this house, because no woman needs to see a room with a bloody hand and a fucking video camera in it and needs to stay for a minute longer. I'm out. You know what I mean? Anyway, I digress.
Real quick, before we get to categories, because that will get into what else happens in this house, which that's safe for category. Let me just say this one thing. Yeah. If I'm in this situation, Patrick, unless it's you personally hanging out down in the cage down there and I got to free you, one of my closest friends, my podcast partner, you'd get free. Anybody else that I've met within the last like 2 years of my life, you're getting left. I am making a beeline out that door, and I'm sorry. I apologize that you're stuck. I apologize whatever's about to happen to you, but I ain't saving you. No. You made the choice to go down in that basement. You made the choice to go down in that hellhole. Not my choice. I'm getting the fuck out. I'm just saying, if I don't already know you and we're not already friends, I'm not that guy. I'm not the guy to go down there and play hero. I'm just not.
My movie would have been 30 minutes long, and the end of it would have been like, bye, motherfucker, have fun. And you just hear me running out of the house. That would have been cut to black, movie over, directed by Patrick Harris.
Real quick, I'm laughing. So the opening scene when she shows up and she's like, I got this Airbnb, I'm staying here, and she had a job interview. It was the whole reason she came to Detroit for a job interview. My first thought, this is terrible. My first thought was, you can't just sleep in your car. Like, just go find somewhere and sleep in your car for the night, because I'm a dude, okay? You know me. I'm a 6'3" big tattooed guy. I'm the scary guy that if you met, you'd probably be like, I'm not going anywhere near this motherfucker. I'm the one who would knock on that door and somebody would answer and say, oh, we double booked this place. I'm like, see ya, I'm out. I'll sleep in my car. I'll just sleep in the back seat. Fuck off.
Well, how about I'll do you one further, Damon. Okay, so, and this is in the trailer. When she realizes, she looks around the neighborhood, all the other houses, there's not even lights or anything. The neighborhood is completely dead except for this one house. I would have pulled up. I would have never gotten out. I would have been like, nope, I'm good. I'll go sleep downtown Detroit. I've been to Detroit a million times. I'll go sleep downtown Detroit. I don't need this. Yeah, I'm not staying in this neighborhood. That made no sense.
That was my first. I was like, you know what? Sleep in the car. And she had a Jeep. They got room. There's room.
She could have laid the seats down. She could have made that happen. No. I mean, listen. Obviously, we're having a bit of fun with that because it's the premise is we need to get as spooky as possible. And I loved that shot actually, where she just scans the neighborhood and realizes, oh, wait a minute, there's not a single light on. There's not a street light on. This lone house, this very dainty, nice, done up house in the middle of absolute dilapidation. There's nothing around them. Like, I liked that. It was really cool and spooky. But yeah, I wouldn't even have left my car.
Yeah,
I would have stopped right there and gone, nah, not staying in this neighborhood. I stayed in a neighborhood like that in Colorado when I was going out to film a documentary with Raquel Pennington, actually. Like, we stayed in an Airbnb that was exactly like that. We got up to it and we were like, there's nothing else around us. Like, all the houses around us were boarded up. But again, we were guys.
Did you stay there? Yeah, did you stay there though? See, yeah, you stepped right into it. There could have been somebody in that basement. Just saying.
Two guys. What is exactly what happens? Two guys just go, yeah, fuck it, let's stay here.
Yeah, dude, I would have been out so quick. I'd be like, you know what? I'm good. My car's fine. I'll sleep there. All right, let's get into categories. We do have some categories to get into, and this will also get into a deeper discussion about some of the other weird oddities and craziness that unfolds in this movie. So let's start things off with best performance. Patrick, in Barbarian, what was your best performance?
All performances were good. Everyone did a good job. So I just went with the one that I think had the most to it, the most to chew on, and that was Justin Long's AJ. Justin Long, I think, has a reputation as sort of being a nice guy. He's almost like a young Tom Hanks. Like, everybody knows and likes Justin Long. He's got a nice face. Sometimes he'll play a douche, but it's never like memorable. This is a memorable douchebag. Like, I really dug what he was able to do with the character, how he was able to sell like the manipulation of his own words. You know, like, he was trying to spin this story of sexual assault to work in his favor. He was a character I loved to hate, a character I was happy to see die. That's good. In a horror movie, there are characters that you want to see get fucked up, and AJ's character, played by Justin Long, done incredibly well.
Yeah, I like Justin Long a lot. I would go as far as to say he's like one of my favorite, like, kind of underrated actors. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't, he's good. You know, he's really solid. Again, I've seen him a lot of Kevin Smith stuff. He did Tusk. He did Zack and Miri, and I've seen him in, you know, he's done some romantic comedies. Going the Distance, which is an underrated romantic comedy he did with Drew Barrymore. I really actually like that film. He's solid. He's a good actor, so I like him very much. And yeah, he was great. I mean, again, playing a douchey kind of, you know, Hollywood character, he does a great job pulling it off, man. And again, that's acting, because he seems like a really incredibly nice guy, and he pulls off douchey Hollywood type really well. Yeah. My best performance, man, there's a couple I could have gone in, and I know the one I'm going for is a little bit more obvious, and I understand I'm going more obvious, but it's just because, boy, Richard Brake is my best performance. And
yes, I thought you might go Richard Brake.
Richard Brake is a regular Rob Zombie performer. I like Rob Zombie, of course. I'm a big Rob Zombie fan. Richard Brake is kind of he's another. So after we get through the AJ kind of twist, then you go to another twist, which is a flashback to what we have to assume is the early 80s, I guess.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
And we meet this guy named Frank, who is played by Richard Brake, and he lives in that house, except when he lives in the house, it's like an incredibly nice neighborhood during the heyday of early 80s, you know, car manufacturing, where Detroit was a hub of activity and jobs and all these kind of things. And he lived in a really nice neighborhood, and that's the house. So all the houses around him, surrounding him, were just quaint, nice family homes. And you come to find out that Richard Brake is a serial killer who basically stalks women, kidnaps them, and brings them back to this torture chamber where he videotapes these awful, horrible things he does to them. But not only is he doing that, he's also getting them pregnant, having kids. I mean, it's just a total, just horrific amount of atrocities being carried out in this house. Now, I mean this in the nicest way possible, because Richard Brake pulls off this performance very well. But immediately, Richard Brake, his demeanor, I would be like, no way I'm going anywhere near this guy. Yeah. He's very creepy. But we've heard a million stories about serial killers who are exactly the same way, and their neighbors never notice. Again, maybe this
poor Richard Brake is like, he just looks like a serial killer. He just does. He really does.
But he's really good, and he pulls it off really, really well. Like, again, when you see him, you're going to say, well, yeah, I know why they cast this guy to play a serial killer, but he does it so well, so subdued, so controlled. He's not like, they don't make him manic. You know, a lot of times I think films get it wrong where they try to make killers so manic, and not to say there aren't manic or kind of out there serial killers. Of course there are. But like it's the creepier guy you don't necessarily see coming, like the guy who's not loud or doing overt things to make you like. It's not like he's showing up to his house with like plastic sheets, shovels, and like formaldehyde or whatever, some guy, whatever, what is it, lime to like break down. You don't see him like showing up to his house with like red flags like that. So his performance was great, and then he actually comes back later in the movie and you find out that his weird, creepy daughter, we assume?
I think it's a daughter, some sort of a daughter.
Has basically held him captive, for years in this like weird basement kind of area where he's staying, and he's like basically, he's one step away from being the creature in Seven who's been tortured by John Doe for a year. Like he's like one small step away from that guy. Laying in a bed sores all over the place. Looks like he hasn't walked in 10 years, been basically bedridden. It's creepy. And I just think he gives a great performance.
Yeah, Richard Brake's one of those guys. I mean, incredible character actor. He was in The Mandalorian, right? I think he this past was it The Mandalorian? I think. Well, yeah, I don't think it was Book of Boba Fett.
I believe you're right. I believe you're right.
He's one of these guys, like he's completely out of time. Like I really dug the diversion of his story. I dug the execution. Again, it's a well executed movie. Like for all my criticism of it, it's a really well executed movie. The scene of him back in the 80s, he's going into a supermarket or like a drugstore, and he needs baby supplies. And you can't imagine. Again, poor Richard Brake. It's not an insult. With that face, you go, "What baby? You're not. No one's having a baby with you. What do you mean?" And the way and his demeanor, he's got this weird, calm, monotone, like delivery. And the woman's like excitedly trying to help him, and he's like, "Just me," and you're just like, "Oh man, something's way wrong." He could have done without showing much of else, and they don't show much actually. They just show him doing that and then stalking a woman. He goes into her house as a water utility guy, and he doesn't do anything when he's in the house except for unlock a window, and then he leaves. So you understand that he's stalking people like that. Like he's creepy as shit.
Yeah.
Like he just is. I guess my only complaint about him is not enough of him, right? We see him when he's an old decrepit man stuck in that downstairs basement. And when AJ gets to finally confront him, he doesn't, that's where he learns that this whole underground system was actually put together by this guy, they call him Frank in the movie. And that the murderous maniac running around the halls in the complete darkness is one of his daughters, who is many times over inbred. It's rather disturbing but she's out there hungry for blood and looking for a baby, which is fucking crazy and weird and creepy.
Yeah, so I thought he did a really good job. I thought he was really good. And again, he was the guy, like as soon as I saw him, I was like, okay, something's going on with this guy. Favorite character. This is where we're going to get into like the crux of what the actual story is, because we're going to talk about your favorite character, which I already know the answer to this. So explain your favorite character and how it relates to the story at large.
So my favorite character is titled The Mother. And that is our kind of our beastie, scary monster in the house, if you will, for lack of a better term. We meet the mother when Tess goes down to find Keith, and Keith is like, something bit me. And then out of the darkness comes this scraggly naked figure with long stringy black hair, and she just bashes Keith's head in, and it's super violent. She is, like we just said many times over, the daughter of Frank through inbreeding, and she is like psycho and twisted and like kind of hills have eyes, I would say. And she lives in this little room down there, and all she wants is a baby. It's so fucked. It's so gross. And so if you freak out in front of her, she will kill you. If you're nice and kind of just go along with her, she will keep you down there. That's what she does with Tess. She actually keeps Tess in a pit and bottle feeds her. Again, fucking weird and creepy and gross. Super gross. But Tess learns that you just have to be nice to her and she won't kill you. AJ's, of course, a complete douche and doesn't know how to process that situation. And when he finally bumps into Tess, he has to get chased around by the mother. I thought the mother as a as a figure in this movie was very entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
She's just so disturbing to watch. And then she has this like insatiable drive that you can't actually be satisfied. She's never going to actually just get a baby to take care of. So this cycle will continue until she dies. I like that.
Yeah, there's a really creepy part where she's basically trying to breastfeed Justin Long's character, and she keeps calling him, instead of baby, she's like, bubba, bubba, bubba.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so fucking creepy. When she first appears, my initial thought is it reminded me of The Descent.
Yeah.
The creatures in The Descent, those weird, like, underground dwelling creatures, like, that's what it did. Like, that's what it reminded me of. I was like, oh, Jesus, this is like The Descent. Like, there's these weird creatures. Now, it wasn't that. It was, not that at all. But it freaked me out. I was like, oh, Jesus, it's The Descent. Yeah, she was creepy and really, really good villain. Like, really good villain. Like, creepy-ass villain, man, and disturbing. That scene where she's trying to breastfeed Justin Long is, it was like vomit inducing. Like, oh, it was so
fucked up.
So scary. So for my favorite character, and I'm saying this, so I'm going favorite character in theory, but I'm actually going in the other direction and saying least favorite character, because it was the character that was best done, and that is AJ. That is Justin Long's character, because they fleshed him out so well in actually a relatively short amount of time. We spend far less time with AJ than we do with Tess and Keith. Now, to be clear, it's not that Tess and Keith aren't fleshed out. It's just that they're kind of having a conversation between them. And while Keith seems less guarded in that conversation, at least at the beginning, Tess is still a little guarded. She's not telling him everything about herself. So we don't learn as much about her. Now, I didn't mind Tess's character, and I love Georgina Campbell. Put her in anything any day of the week, I'll watch her. I think she's fantastic.
Yeah, she was a great lead in this movie.
Oh, she was incredible. I like her a lot. But AJ's character was despicable, and I really didn't like him, and I really rooted for him to die. And that, to me, is the mark of a great character. Like, I was like, this guy is so problematic and such an asshole that, like, I really want him to die. Like, not in, like, the 30 miles from nowhere scenario where I just hate everybody and I don't care if they die. I wanted his character to die. Like, there's a difference.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't care about those. I was like, because there's a scene where he goes out with a buddy of his from Detroit, and his buddy from Detroit's like, just tell me the real deal, like, what actually happened? And he basically confesses to the assault. He's like, well, she said no at first, but then she got into it. And I'm like, I'm literally pounding myself on the head, like, oh, Jesus Christ, dude. And then he, like, calls her and apologizes, and he's like, I didn't mean for it. Like, what? Oh my God, it was so, like, red flags everywhere. So when I say favorite character, I mean least favorite character, because it was the best character in the film, and that was, like, I've rarely rooted for a character to die more in a horror film than that guy. And that's a good character.
Yeah, that's what you want in a horror film. You want a healthy mix of characters you don't want to see die and characters you can't wait to see die. And then so the satisfaction of their death is that much greater. I'll give a quick shout out, like a honorable mention, to the character of Andre, played by James Butler.
Oh yes.
In the early parts of the movie, before you know that anything's going on, Tess gets out of her car after her job interview, and she's going to go back into the Airbnb. And just in the distance, in blurry, is this guy rushing up to her going, don't go in there, don't go in there. And you're like, oh, what's that? Like, you're meant to think that might be a problem. And then she runs into the house because she's freaked out by this guy. He turns out to be a vagrant who lives in the neighborhood and knows what's going on in this house. And he was actually trying to save her. I picked up on that pretty quick. I was like, oh, that guy's trying to tell her, like,
he's trying to warn her.
He's trying to warn her, don't go in this house. And that is exactly what he was. And there's what I thought was happening ended up happening. I wanted to give a shout out to him because I liked him. He also was the source of a major bit of exposition. He basically explains the movie to you. Yeah. Once she gets away from the house, he explains how the whole movie works. The one thing, and this really pissed me off, Damon, this is really where the movie got me. He goes, when she makes her daring escape, and right in front of him, he saves her just in the nick of time from the mother, and she wants to go back in there to save AJ because that's how she is. And he goes, you can't go back there. You can't go back in there. That's not even the worst thing that's in there. He says that. Do you remember that line?
I don't, actually.
He says very clearly, that's not even the worst thing that's in there. And I went, oh, here comes a big twist. I was like waiting for it. That line of dialogue never pays off. Now, technically it does. And I'm sure in the mind of Zack Cregger, he's like, no, it totally does. Because AJ confronts Frank, who was the monster that did all this to all these women over the years. But the worst thing that's in there is decrepit and in a bed and ends up shooting himself. Like, he is no threat to the movie. It does not escalate the movie in any way, shape, or form. When that line was delivered to me, I was expecting an escalation that never happened. And I was like, damn, if you'd have just left that piece of the dialogue out, or remixed it to something like, you know, you don't even want to see if there could be way more horrors in there, something. But when he says that, he's teeing us up for something that never came.
And I don't remember it, so that's probably why it never affected me, because I just didn't catch that line of dialogue, or I don't remember catching that line of dialogue. So maybe that
he says, that's not even the worst thing that's in there. And I go, oh shit, I couldn't wait for something worse than the mother, and it never came. Yeah,
that could be just because I didn't hear it, because I didn't catch up on that. So that may also be part of the reason why. Let's talk about best scare. There are a lot of weird jump scares and creepy scares and all kinds of weird stuff going on here. So what was your best scare in Barbarian?
This movie does a great job with building tension and dread, like a lot of like dark hallways with a single source of light, and you can't see what's in front of you. And once you get your first taste of the mother, you don't want to know what else will come out of the darkness. So there's a lot of great dread in this movie. My best scare actually was, I would say it would almost be best creepy moment. And that is, you know, the mother is chasing AJ around because she's tired of his shit also. And she chases him down this one hallway to a door. This is where I thought that's not the worst thing that's even in that house was coming. He gets stuck at that door. He doesn't know what's beyond the door. And you can see the form of mother sort of, you know, starting to come into the light a little bit. And you're like, I don't like seeing mother come into the light. It's gross. And then she stops, because she realizes what door he's at. And then she starts to back away and she disappears into the dark. Now I go, whatever's fucking scaring the mother, whatever's behind that door must be so awful. I was like, is this the origin story for Sloth from the Goonies? Like, what is it? What's going on in that door?
He opens the door and you'll hear, hey, you guys.
Yeah, he opens the door and it's a Texas Chainsaw 2022 on a loop.
Oh God,
you know, just something really terrifying, something really bad. And it turns out to just be the decrepit old Frank, like bedridden, and he can't do anything at all. He's like a zero threat to anybody, actually. But I loved that the visual scare of just seeing her just faintly in the light stop and back away. And I was like, that was setting me up for something big. It didn't end up coming, but that scare itself was effective.
Yeah. So mine is the initial scare, and that is when mother first appears. And I know it's an obvious one, but I say this all the time. Sometimes the most obvious scares are the best scares. When you set it up and it pays off. You talked about that. When they set it up, they didn't necessarily pay it off. Still scared you, but they didn't pay it off the right way. And I get that. I understand that. Mine was the opposite, where they set it up and it paid off, because you're already in this creepy ass underground basement. Looks like you're in like a coal mine, basically. They got wood lined walls and like dirt, and it's very small, like very creepy area. And then when Keith's character says something bit me, and you're like, what is down here? Like, what is going on? What is down here? And again, you're talking about single source of light. She's got like a phone light, whatever. And then out of nowhere comes mother, and she grabs him and smashes his head against the wall. It was jarring. I mean, it was completely jarring. And I was like, what? Because I knew it was, because something was coming. We all knew something was coming. What it was, we didn't know.
Yeah.
And when it actually happened and you saw it, and again, my first thought was The Descent, which I love The Descent. That's one of my favorite horror films of all time. That I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. Like, I was like, oh, crap. And then the best part, here's the other part that I loved. Boom, just done.
Yeah.
No follow-up, you don't see him dragging the corpse, none of that. Boom, 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 he's dead, screaming, creepy, nasty, naked lady. And then cut to black, and then you go to AJ's character in California. That was honestly probably my favorite part of the entire film, because it was so unexpected.
Yeah, that's a great way to kind of shock the audience, is to leave them hanging on that. Don't follow up with it. Leave them hanging on this terrifying creature coming out of the blackness that's screaming to high hell and is bashing Keith's head in, and then cut to black and explain nothing of it. And then you're in Malibu. Yeah. You're like, what the fuck? That's fucked up. And then, what's that going to lead to down the line? So good technique there for a good scare.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about best gore. That is next there, best gore. Now, this isn't necessarily the goriest movie, but there are some gory parts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like every bit of gore came with every kill.
Yeah.
So like you could have almost interchanged them. But my kill and my gore are different. Keith's head getting bashed in, we've mentioned it a few times. It's not just like a moment. It's a drawn out, she's slamming his head against the cave wall until it's pulp. I mean, she just keeps smashing his head, and it's just it's going from solid skull to mush. Like, that's how much she keeps smashing it in. And they just keep showing it and showing it and showing it. It's highly disturbing, very, very gory moment.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was a really good one. That was disturbing as hell. And again, that was my favorite scary moment, because when she jumps out of the dark and just starts smashing his head, I'm like, oh, what the fuck? So yeah, that was a great gory moment. My gory moment is probably the other top one, which is at the end of the movie. It looks like AJ's going to get away with it. It looks like he basically sacrifices Tess to save himself. And everything you thought about this guy up to this point, like me saying I wanted him to die, I rooted for him to die, you're like, this motherfucker, he's going to get away with this. Like, he's going to be a complete and utter scumbag, and he's going to get away with it. Well, spoilers, he doesn't get away with it, because he ends up approaching Mother and Tess on the ground after he essentially tossed them off the roof. I don't know a better way to say it, but essentially tossed them off the roof. And then he goes down to check on him, basically thinking he's got away with it. And Mother pops up. She's still alive, and she gouges his eyes out. And it is so disgusting, because his eye matter comes through her fingers and just kind of like gets squirted out the other side. It's really nasty, gross, but also great.
And highly satisfying, and my best kill. We'll just roll right into that, because AJ was my best kill. This is why I picked AJ again for my for best performance, because he's a really well drawn character. They give you a moment where he almost thinks he's going to be heroic, like he says something to the effect of like, I gotta do what's right. Like, oh, he's coming to terms with the fact that he did something wrong to a woman back in LA. So maybe he can make up for it here. That's kind of seems to be what his rationale is, that he's kind of spinning in his head. They're getting chased by Mother through the streets. They get up to the top of the silo, and the gun is gone. They don't have a way to shoot her. So he's like, oh, well, geez. And by the way, Tess has been shot by AJ by accident, so she's weakened. And he's like, you're going to have to slow her down for me so I can get away. That's his way of like redeeming the whole situation. And so as she's climbing up to this top of the silo to get them, he tosses Tess over the side, knowing that she will chase after her baby. They go falling to the ground, and he goes down to inspect the bloody mess. Tess landed on top of the Mother. So we figure, the Mother's head probably got bashed in or something. Turns out she's got that Hills Have Eyes mutant strength or whatever, and the fall didn't kill Mother, and she gouges his eyes out, and it's a hell of a satisfying kill.
It is the most satisfying kill. It's really, really well done. And just like I said, utterly disturbing, like so many parts of this film. Ultimately, there's only a couple who kills in this film. I mean, there really is. We only see basically three all total. You get to, we basically see Frank kill himself. You see Keith get his head bashed in, and you see AJ dying. So there's only
there's Andre too. Don't forget about that.
Yeah, but that's kind of short. That's not really like it's not.
Yeah, but his didn't his like whole arm get ripped off or something?
She basically ripped off his arm, beat him to death with it.
That was a pretty good one.
It is, but it's also so quick. Like it's also
it's the fastest one.
Yeah, so I'm going back to Keith's kill. Like his head getting bashed in was just so utterly disturbing and off-putting and just jarring. Like I said, I don't know a better way to put it. Jarring. Like when I saw it, I was like, again, saw it come, knew something was happening. And somebody said something bit me, for Christ's sake. You know what I mean? Like they knew something was happening.
Yeah.
But the idea that he just gets his head bashed in and violently gets his head bashed in is just, I mean, it's just, that's my favorite moment in the movie all over. And it pays off in so many ways.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. I mean, it's jarring too, because it's like, oh, well, it's Bill Skarsgård. He's like kind of well known. You wouldn't expect Bill Skarsgård to go out like that in a movie like this, and he does. He goes out violently. I mean, that's, if you're gonna kill only a few people, make them count.
I saw at the end of the movie that when I read an interview with the director, he had said that they started this out as an independent film, and then in the middle of when they were getting this together, I guess the financier passed away. And so they weren't sure the film was going to get made, and it got picked up by New Regency, which is a part of Disney. It got picked up like a studio there. I saw at the end of the film that Bill Skarsgård was an executive producer on the film. I don't know. He's never really mentioned in interviews, and I haven't gone that deep into reading interviews with Zack Cregger, the director, just basically so I know the premise, like how he got the idea for the film, for my intro. But I have to assume that like when Bill Skarsgård got involved, like I have to imagine he probably volunteered his services to be involved as an actor and then also be a producer because he believed in it, because he's actually only in it for about 30 minutes. He gets killed rather violently and then you never see him again. And then I saw his name pop up as a producer credit. And my first guess was he liked the premise and he's like, I'll be in this film. You know what I mean? Because he's a fairly well-named actor, well-known horror actor especially. So I have to that was my guess. Like he's just like, yeah, I'll get involved. Let me know. I'll work as a producer and I'll star in it too. Like I'll be in it for 30 minutes and then be a player. Like, you know what I mean? And then you don't see it coming.
I have to imagine some producer somewhere was like, oh, we can get Bill Skarsgård, but he's going to need back end on this. Like if this movie makes money, like, you know, Bill's going to have to, that's why he got an executive producer credit. And there are other names like Kate Bosworth is like one of the voices on the phone.
Yeah.
Sarah Paxton, who I know, Will Greenberg. There are names
Sarah Paxton is married to the director. That's how she's in it.
Oh, well, there you go. Okay, so she did that for free.
Yeah,
definitely.
she is married. She's married to the director, so that's how that connection is in there.
That takes care of that. She definitely worked for free. But yeah, I mean, they got a couple of good names in here, but I would imagine putting Bill Skarsgård in there and putting him in the trailer helps you sell your film.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, he's a well-known name. And again, I love Georgina Campbell. She's not as well-known as Bill Skarsgård. Yeah. So yeah.
I'd be happy to bash Bill Skarsgård's head in to get people to come see my movie.
Exactly. All right, let's talk about funniest moment. And this is the same for both of us. And I'm glad you put this in there because I went to the theater by myself. I didn't go with anyone to see this movie. I went by myself. But that was the moment when I wish someone had been next to me so I could say, this is hilarious. Yeah. Because this is it's funny, but it's also like the moment when you realize AJ, the character played by Justin Long, you're like, this guy is so freaking oblivious. But like, I believe it. I believed it about him.
Yeah, no, it's the funniest moment. We talked about it a little earlier. So he comes back to his Airbnb and he's all pissed off because there's all these clothes and stuff that are still there. He doesn't understand why the property manager didn't clean the house. He's being an asshole, a really entitled asshole or whatever. And eventually he realizes somebody left the basement door open, and then something clicks in his head. And you think he's going to like go down and investigate shit. And he looks down there and he sees the weird setup from the chair because Tessa tried to light the tunnel and all that. And he looks at everything and then he runs to his computer. And the next thing you see on the computer is the searches, does basement count as square footage? And then he just decides like, oh, let me do an investigation of the basement area to see how much extra square footage I can get out of it because I need to sell this house because I need to pay for my legal fees. So it becomes this long montage of him measuring the rooms. He bumps into the video room and he goes, what the fuck is this? And then the tape measure comes out and he's like, okay, that's 10 by 12. Okay, so that's 120.
He literally moves the bloody bed out of the way to measure the square footage. It's hilarious.
Yeah. He's like, ew, what the fuck was that? Like, he's just not noticing. And then he's like going down the hallway and then he comes across the bloody cage. He's like, what the fuck is that? But he's still just worried about measuring. That's all he's doing. It's just, and the whole crowd I was with, they were laughing too. I mean, it's definitely done for comedic effect. And it also, informs you of who the character is. An oblivious douchebag.
Well, like I said, that goes back to the heart of like, she goes down there and she's terrified. He goes down there and he's thinking, how can I make money off this? Because he's not worried. He's not scared. You know what I mean? He's a dude. So like that, again, that's an exaggerated example what we've talked about through this entire review of like the microaggressions, the weird things that women have to worry about that men don't. That's, I know it's an exaggerated exclamation point on it, but that's true. Like, he's not worried about the creepy room with a bloody bed, and a bloody handprint, and a video camera, and a weird underground like cave basement. None of that stops him from thinking, I could sell this for more money, and he grabs his tape measure. It is so hilarious and so on brand for that character.
It really is. Again, Damon, I stayed in a house just like it.
It's
guys can do this. Women can't.
It is. It's true. It's absolutely true. And like I said, that's why I named him my least favorite character, because it was like, I know people like that. Not, let me be clear. I know people who would be that oblivious to the situation they're in. Not like the awful things he's doing. I'm saying like the kind of person who just is so oblivious to the world around them. You know what I mean? Like, who just does or says or whatever stupid that you're like, what is wrong with you? Like, do you not see the situation you're in right now? Like,
100%. 100%.
We all know those people. We all know those people. Oblivious. Yeah, you just have no idea, like, that they're in like a bad situation or an uncomfortable situation. There's an old, it reminds me of a commercial from back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was I want to say it was like a Snickers commercial or something. But this is this guy, and I don't know why I'm going off on this tangent, but you'll enjoy it. You might remember this commercial. There's this dude in a car, and I think he's eating a Snickers, eating something, and he's bouncing and singing to Another One Bites the Dust by Queen. And he's in his car, and he's driving by people, and they're looking at him like he is like, so like, what are you doing, dude? He's bopping and singing. Another one bites dust. Another one bites dust. Yeah. And he's like dancing, smiling. He's looking at people doing the finger gun, pointing at people, and they're all looking at him like he's insane. You draw back, and he's driving a hearse. Singing Another One Bites the Dust, and he's like laughing, and there's a dude next to him looking at him like, what in the fuck is wrong with you? One of my favorite all-time like commercials, cracks me up. That is that dude. Like, he's driving a hearse, singing Another One Bites the Dust in a funeral procession, and not noticing why people are looking at him odd. That's this dude. Like, he's in a creepy basement with a video camera, bloody handprints, and a freaking cave basement. And he's like, how much can I sell this for? How much is the square footage? That's that dude.
100%.
So good. All right. Last but very not least, at the end of the day, Patrick, we always like to close out on this one, and that is it scary? So at the end of the day, Barbarian, is it scary?
I think it's got a high dread factor. I think so. I mean, I do take a lot of issue with how the story moves and how I don't think it necessarily pays off. But truth be told, I was on the edge of my seat hoping that was coming. That moment never really came for me. I think everything that I expected to happen happened. That was me as an audience goer. But the anticipatory dread is all over this movie. So whether I liked this movie, whether I give it an A rating or not, doesn't even matter. Did it have that anticipatory dread that a good horror film has? It absolutely does have that.
Yeah, I agree. And I would go a step further. Again, as I said, I probably like it more than you liked it, but I did like it. I also liked the fact that it subverted expectations here and there in terms of where the story was going, in terms of the twists and turns. Like I said, when we go to AJ's story, you're like, why are we going here? And then when you go to the Richard Brake character for the flashback, you realize right away he's at the house, but you're like, what, why? And then again, it starts again, very kind of putting it together. And I like the way they did that because it was off-putting. It kind of took you out of your element, because every time they did it, whether it was AJ in the car in Malibu or the switch over to Richard Brake in the flashback scene, all of those are meant to jar you because it's at the end of a very dramatic, scary moment, and then they just switch gears. You're like, what the fuck is going on? And it's just a really, really well done way to do it. And like I said, it did scare me. I was very much on the edge of my seat for this film, and even though I know you said it was a little more predictable in your head, maybe I'm the dummy here. I didn't see it coming the way it came at me. I knew, again, kind of like the scene I'm talking about with the whole, Bill Skarsgård getting his head bashed in. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know what was coming. And that's where I talk about subverting my expectations. I did not expect a feral, incest-ridden, naked woman to come crawling out of the darkness to smash his head. I did not see that. I knew something was coming, but that still caught me off guard. That's why I said it was scary. Overall, it was scary. There are infuriating moments. There's a scene where Tess gets away and she calls the cops, and the cops just don't believe her, and I'm like, I'm angry at that moment.
But it was set up really well.
It was,
because she's manic, she's completely disheveled. As far as they're concerned, she's a crackhead.
Yeah.
So they're not taking her serious at all. I actually liked that, I liked it. It made me angry because I'm like, that's the reality. Like, it was so real. Yeah, it'll totally infuriate you. But I was like, oh, that's cleverly done, because it makes sense why the cops would be dismissive of her. Yeah. My biggest like issues actually were with the AJ and the Frank scenes. I think they show their hand too quickly. I think that was my problem with those particular scenes. I knew very quickly that AJ indeed was a sexual assault. Excuse me. That he had committed sexual assault, so I knew to root against him. He mentions the house in Michigan. I know that it's connected. Sorry, one of them things happened. Jesus. So my point is, those two stories, they give away too much.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it. It didn't bother me, though, and I think overall, I really enjoyed this film. And like I said, I understand it's going to end up being a very polarizing film. There are going to be people who love it, like myself. There's going to be people who are in middle ground, which is kind of where I assume you are. And there's going to be people who I probably will hate it. I get it. And that's a lot of films. That's almost every film, actually. But I personally really enjoyed it. It did keep me guessing. I didn't see some of the twists and turns coming. I liked the performances a lot. And this is one of the most creative, interesting horror films of the year by far. Kind of we talked about earlier this year with Fresh, which is still top of my list as far as like my favorite horror films of the year, a film that just really kind of drops you on your ass in a way that you don't necessarily see coming. This was kind of that for me, not as dramatically, but because again, I knew something was coming, just didn't know that was coming. And that, again, it still surprised me and it still caught me off guard. So overall, again, I really enjoyed this film. We're so deep into spoilers, I assume at this point you've probably seen it out there as well. But I really enjoyed it. And when the year is over, I feel like this is still going to be one of those films that I'm going to talk to. When people are talking to me come December or January saying, what films didn't I see last year that I should watch? And I'll be like, if you didn't see Barbarian, I would highly recommend checking it out, and don't let anyone tell you about it beforehand.
Yeah, don't listen to this podcast beforehand.
Or at least stop it after. Listen to it, just don't listen to the spoiler section.
Yeah, something.
Yeah. All right, folks, we're going to get out of here. Of course, we want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes into the show each and every week. As I said, we're going to have a lot of new movies coming this month. We've got Pearl, the prequel to X, coming out in a matter of days. We're going to be reviewing that, of course. We're also going to be talking about Smile, which comes out at the end of the month. That's one that had a trailer that got me interested, because I don't know that I would have ever known what that was. The trailer got me really intrigued by that film. Yeah. And of course, we also mentioned Don't Worry, Darling, which is kind of a horror thriller, kind of blurs the line. Lots of problems in that one, but I feel like we're going to end up talking about that. So yeah, we got a lot of new films coming up this month, so stay tuned for that. Make sure you check us out on all of your favorite podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and you can always find us over on my website, nerdcoremovement.com. You can also send us questions, comments, or just like us in general on social media. You can find us everywhere. Rewind of Living Dead is the actual handles, but just search Rewind of the Living Dead. You'll find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We just kind of started everything up recently, so give us follows over there and send us questions, comments, and you can also send us emails at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. And you can also hit us up personally on Twitter. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
A big thank you as always for everyone that tunes in. We will see you next week for another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace.